Fox, select position.
All right, we're back for another week. This week we're at Barcelona. So apologies for the debacle on the previous lap guide. I didn't have the I didn't have the right layout, and on top of that, I didn't add in that voiceover. So we're gonna do it right this time. So Barcelona is going to be kind of similar to Mugello. It's definitely going to require a lot of patience. There's a lot of long sweepers, a lot of camber corners that we're going to go over. This week we're going to be on a fairly hot track surface, so tire management's going to be huge. On top of Barcelona notoriously eating up tires already. So with that being said, we'll get right after the lap. Of course, we're coming down the start finish. Now we've got several different references we can use for our brake marker. I'm coming into turn 1. So I'm going to pause it right here. The 100 board is going to be too late depending on how much speed you're carrying down the start finish. So if you have a really good exit on that last corner onto the straight, that 100 board will definitely be too late. If you're in draft, which is most likely going to be the case in a race session, we want to use an even earlier reference. So typically the one that I'm using is going to be these two lights here on the fence line. They're the easiest thing for me to pick out at a distance. So if we get into cockpit view here, so if we back it up, I can pick that out, especially when it's right in front of the Marshall stand there. That's pretty contrasting. Now something else that we can use is the loudspeaker stand on the fence line. Now that's about where I'm actually braking. Once again, I just use these things as a reference. So once I see these two lines, I'm about 2 car widths away or 2 car lengths away when I start my braking zone. Being right up against the speaker on the fence line is another good spot if you can pick it out. So whatever's going to be easiest for you guys. Now we're going to downshift from 6th all the way into 3rd. So we want our 6th to 5th and 5th to 4th gear shift happening pretty quickly. And then we're going to downshift into 3rd right as we start to turn in. Now coming to the apex, there's kind of 2 different ways we can take it here. I find that I'm most consistent just putting my right side tires onto the candy cane rumbles. Now you can put your right side tire to the right of the turtle or the curb, whatever we want to call it. You can put your right side tires here. If you go right side tires into the dirt though, that is an off track. And then if you hit this with your right side tires, that will send the car into the air, and that's going to delay rotation. So we want to make sure that we're not hitting that curb, especially. If you're going for the extra bit of lap time to help open up the second corner, then the right side tires on the right side will be a little bit faster. They're going to be in the middle of the track, and on exit of our second turn, it's pretty wide, so you can pretty much be flat out. I do lift a little bit on this lap. My tires were getting a little hot, so just for tire preservation, I lifted ever so slightly. Now we can use quite a bit of curbing here. Right side tires onto the candy cane curbing would be the limit, so I try to keep them right on that white line before we get an incident point. On exit, this is where the compromise to set up the next corner is going to be really important. So backtracking a little bit, when we're tracking out from turn 1, I'm not going any farther than the middle of the track before I start to turn left for turn 2. And on the exit of turn 2, I'm not going any farther on track out than the middle of the track as well. And that's just to help set up this next corner. We want to open this up as much as possible because even though it is a really long right-hand sweeper, to a degree it's still somewhat of a straight. We're going to be mostly on throttle through this section. So I do use just a little bit of trail brake to help get the car turned in. I'm lifting as well once we see this dirt patch show up at apex. And then as the dirt patch starts to disappear, we can feed that throttle back in. So I'm actually getting on throttle even a little bit earlier on this lap. And then something to note as well, especially because we're on a hot track surface, this corner can be really tricky, especially for the rear tires. So if we have too much steering in the car and we're full throttle, it's going to want to bind the car up a little bit, and you can actually start to dig into traction control So the trick to preventing this, or risking a spin or anything like that, we want to really be sensitive to our force feedback feel through here. So as the car starts to get a little bit loose in the rear, or those purple lights start to flash on your dash, we want to open the wheel back up. So not turn left necessarily unless we want to countersteer a slide. But as that car's starting to get a little loose, we can take our steering wheel here and start turning to the left ever so slightly. Open it up to center, one of the two, just to help keep the car floating outwards of the track. We have a lot of track surface to use here, and it's not too tight of a turn, so we can use all of the track available. Now coming into turn 4, we're going to brake right before our bridge. So I like to straddle the curbing. This is going to help open up our next right-hander, and you can see I'm braking about a half of a car length before this white line, or right before the bridge itself. We're going to downshift 2 times, and we're going to take a late apex here. This corner is especially tricky. It makes you think that it's just a regular, maybe 90 to 110 degree corner, but it's a decreasing radius, so it's super tight on entry and then starts to open up more and more on exit. So we want to make sure our apex is later into the corner. We can track all the way out here, and this corner is going to be pretty similar to turn 3 as well. It's a really long sweeper, so there is a chance for your rear tires to get some slippage, starting to spin, whatever the case may be. We just want to open that wheel back up. See if we have any moments of that steering happening. So we're going to watch this in slow-mo, and you can see I'm feeding that steering kind of back and forth. I'm not quite sawing it, but I'm trying to drive right at the limit before I either have understeer or oversteer. Now coming up to our next corner, turn 5, this one's going to be pretty tricky for you to pick out a braking zone. Now if we set up turn 4 properly, and we're exiting all the way to the left hand of the track, if we're coming back over to this right hand side to set up the corner, you can think of it as once we get over to the right hand side, we can start to get on the brakes. Now the other way, and the way that I've been doing it, there is a little bit of a crest here. So when we look at our track surface, we can see the track starts to go kind of downhill. It starts to fall away a little bit. If we back this up, even more so. So right as we're approaching this crest is a good point to start getting on the brakes. Now play around with it. If you're going too deep into the corner, then of course we need to start braking sooner. And if you find that the car will turn in really easily coming into it, then we need to brake a little bit later. So in other words, if we're getting all the way out here to this light patch of asphalt, then we're braking way too late. And if we're turning in aggressively and we can get onto the curbing here, then we're braking a little too early. So play around with that, see if you can find a happy medium and a comfort spot. It's really going to come down to a cadence or a timing. So definitely take a little bit of work. It's a little tricky. Now coming into this next corner, a late apex is typically advised. So I am apexing about in the middle of the corner, but we can see my car is actually pointed just a little bit to the left. So it is kind of a late apex here, even though it's in the middle of the corner, just because of that car angle. And then something else to note as well, the Porsche's strongest ability, I suppose, is that it can carry that mile per hour through the corner. So a lot of times you'll see my car get into the corner, stay tight, and then exit out of the corner. And some of the other GT4s, especially the McLaren or the Mercedes, taking a little bit wider entry and getting a little bit later apex will be a little bit easier. Now on track out, we can get our left-hand tires onto the Candy Cane curbs. If we go any farther, our right side tires touch the gravel, or our left side tires get into the green patch. That will be an off track. Now sometimes, especially in other sims, iRacing as well though, you'll see some guys try to cut this section to try and cut distance out of it. You can do that, and it is a smart thing to do, especially if you have somebody close behind or you're planning on defending into the next braking zone. As far as normal lap time goes, though, I do find it easier to stay off to the right-hand side. What'll happen if we stay tight to the left-hand side here is you'll come across and you have to wind up making an even larger turning radius. Where if we come in straight, we have less car angle to get turned into the corner. So this is kind of, in other words, opening the corner up. This is a lot easier to get set up and prepared. Coming into your braking zone and then getting that rotation done. We're going to use all of the curbing on entry with medium to light brake pressure. Now in this lap, I did not abuse the apex as much as I could have. We can actually get right side tires right up against the white line, left side tires onto the green here. That's going to help basically open up exit, because this exit pinches you off ever so slightly. So don't be afraid to use any of this curbing here as well. Play around with it, see what feels good. And on exit, we can get all the way over to the right-hand side, left side tires onto the Candy Cane curbs. Now, something to note, if we catch these turtle curbs here, we'll jump the car ever so slightly. Now, it's fine to do that, but when we jump them, we want to make sure that we have a straight or close to straight steering angle. If we're bounding up the steering and we're too far right, or maybe we're trying to steer left to avoid it, if you have too much of that steering angle in there, it can actually cause the car to spin into the wall or into the gravel or get collected by another car. So be cautious of that one. Now coming into this next corner, this has been the trickiest corner for me getting my sight laps in here. So I'm actually using the grass just a little bit to help not only rotate the car on entry, but to help open that corner up and really maximize our track usage. Now I'm using very light brake pressure with obviously no throttle. And then as we got into the corner, the deeper we went, the more pressure I put into the car. So the way I was thinking about it is, as I'm coming into the corner, it's uphill, so the car wants to grip into the surface, but it's off camber, so the car also wants to fall away. We want a late apex into this corner. So ideally, we want to make sure that we're apexing after this turtle or this yellow curb here. So you'll see, or you might play around, you'll find that an increase of trail braking pressure about halfway through the corner will help get that weight onto the front tires, really get the car turned in so we can get this late apex. Now the reason why that's so important is this section breeds off tracks here. So if we get our right side tires onto the red and white curbs here, in this section in particular, you will get an off track. Now, it's kind of an imaginary line. So this area where we have the white triangles on the green painted surface, you can actually get right side tires onto the curbing here without getting an off track. Anything before that, we will risk getting that incident point. So that late apex and making sure you get rotation into the previous corner is very, very valuable through here. Now coming into our next section, I like to brake in between the 100 board, and I believe this is a sound speaker box on the fence as well. So anywhere in between here is going to be pretty good. I will say the earlier the better, so I would err on the side of the 100 board. Now coming into the corner, we can be pretty aggressive with the brake pressure. I'm about 75 to 80%. And we're almost going to follow the line of the curb, the end of the curbing here, as far as the arc that we want to take into the corner. So it is going to be a little bit of a late apex because it is such a long corner, and once again is a decreasing radius. Now one thing to note in particular, there is actually a little bit of camber on the inside here. So once we get into the apex, where we can see all of the tire marks on the track itself, there's just an or slight amount of camber here. If we can get the car into that position, it's going to help force the car into the ground, really grip up, and you can carry a little bit more speed. If we wind up a little bit farther out to the right-hand side, there will be marbles out there, and then the track is going to want to throw you outward because of that lack of camber as well. So once we get into the apex, we can start to feed the throttle pretty aggressively. Now coming into our next corner, turn 11, there's a couple different lines we can take here. So once again, it'll be a little bit similar to the carousel at Mugello. You have the option of taking a really wide entry and a late apex into the corner, or we can treat it like Rivage at Spa, where we can make a little bit of a double apex here. So I'm all the way to the left-hand side to help open this corner up. My preferred line is to dive in and treat it like a double apex. So we're going to get right up against it. On this lap in particular, I don't float out as much as I normally would, but you can see I come off of the curbing, let the car finish rotating or turning, and then I come back in and start to feed that throttle back in. Now for my Porsche guys, if you're struggling with that corner, you can downshift into second, which will help rotation. Now make sure that we're delaying that downshift until we're about in the corner itself. So after we get into that first of the two apexes, or as we start to really aggressively turn in if we're taking that wide line. And that downshift is going to help send all of the weight forward on those front tires and really help get the car rotated. Now on exit, we can use all of the curbing here. What's important is that we don't get our left side tires into the gravel. Surprisingly, I don't get an off track here. This is right at the limit though. And this will be another case of we kind of want to follow this arc where the curbing ends. So think of this last white triangle here as kind of a turn-in reference. Now we can drive on these curves quite a bit. I think you can even get your left side tires onto the red and white curbing if you really wanted to get all of that track usage. And that's going to allow you to get on throttle a little bit sooner as well. And finally, coming into our last section, there's two different ways to approach this last corner. So my preferred way is to kind of do a 50-50 grind down the curbing itself. This was a lot easier for me to set up the braking zone. We're using light to medium brake pressure coming into this, and then we can come off of the curbing, dip our left side tires into the grass, and make sure we're getting to apex gently. So this is a pretty fast corner. So it's very important to be very precise and very smooth with your inputs. That way we're not shocking the tire, causing any ABS or tire overheating for that matter. So taking this wider line, opening up this corner a lot more via this 50-50 grind is going to make all that stuff happen a little bit easier. Now if you're not comfortable with it, that's definitely fine. And then the alternative line is to take obviously a little bit tighter line on entry into the braking zone in particular. Your left side tires would get right up against the curbing here. You'll have to brake a little bit sooner or a little bit harder to make this corner. So a little bit of trail braking, we get right up to the apex, and then we can be really aggressive on throttle on exit. We can use all of the curbing out here as well, and once again, left side tires can't touch that gravel without getting that off track. Now the only other things to talk about, we talked about tire management. We didn't talk too much about tire management other than from our start, but we want to make sure that we're being really smooth and avoiding the ABS. One, because it's Barcelona, and two, because of those track temps, the surface temps themselves. So if we use a lot of ABS coming into these corners, you're going to overheat the surface of the tire itself. This is just going to compound, negatively compound your lap times, lap after lap. Now, something else to keep in mind, any of the cars that are prone to understeer, of course, obviously the Porsche, we want to have a pretty low brake bias. So I ran these laps at 46. You can go even a little bit lower after the car is warmed up. You have heat in the tires. I found that on my out laps, anything lower than a 46 got a little too slidey on exits. But otherwise, the only other thing to talk about as far as tires go, once again, is to just be as smooth as possible, open those corners up as much as possible, and try to gently carry that speed. If we're really forcing the car into the corners, we're being really aggressive with that steering input, that again will negatively compound into issues for tire management over that lap. Uh, Other than that, I wish you guys the best of luck in officials, and we'll see you throughout the week.